I'm very happy to be here among friends and with Professor Anita Nowinski, with whom I have worked side by side for so many years. The theme for this discussion was suggested by the organizers. Thus, we'll talk about the current status of New Christian studies in Brazil. The regular studies about New Christians were initiated in the 60s of the last century with Anita Nowinski's Cristãos Novos na Bahia. She opened the world a new theme grounded in primary sources, research, and documental archives. She opened a new chapter in Brazilian history, in New Christian history, and in Jewish history. She inaugurated what is now called the Nowinski School, that comprehends most of the researches on the Inquisition that were done in Brazil in the last decades, both about New Christians as well the researches on other aspects of the Inquisition action in the colony. Nowadays, there are a few research centers on New Christian studies in Brazilian universities, Rio de Janeiro and some Northeastern federal colleges, but it is at the University of São Paulo where the majority of studies on New Christians are made. The New Christians community from the north to the south of Brazil were studied from the 16th to the 18th centuries, and some locations had the vast majority of conversos trials found, transcribed, and studied. Just so we have an idea on the recent studies in Brazil, since 2001, 36 master dissertations were about Inquisition. Only 5 were about New Christians. Some of those studies were published, and their majority may be accessed online. In the last 5 years, very few studies approached the New Christians in the colony. Only 7 dissertations and only 1 PhD thesis. There is, among others, websites, one in the University Federal of Sergipe named The Atlantic Diaspora of the Sephardi, dedicated to the study of the relationship between the New Christians and the Kabbalah. There are a few literary works that deal with the New Christians, as Professor Anita told you about Machado de Assis, as some movies, both fiction and documentary. Currently in Brazil, we have a great number of works about the Inquisition as an institution, the Inquisitors and the Familiares, and the inquisitorial structure in the colony. There are also a number of works on the victims imprisoned by other crimes. The aforementioned studies, even when not dedicated to the New Christians, follow a pattern of disregard to the study of the victims, especially the New Christians, despite the fact that all scholars agree that the main targets of the Inquisition were, in fact, the New Christians. These studies dismiss the personal suffering of the imprisonment and the charge of heresy of Judaism. They also dismiss the awful physical conditions of the inquisitorial prisons, even affirming that they were not so bad since they allowed for meals and sunbathing. They justify the inquisitorial actions of persecuting, arresting, and killing people due to its ancestry and religion that were defined by the Inquisition regiments and documents, and where Judaism was not always meant what we understand as such, but what the Inquisition thought it was. We know that 1,076 prisoners were sent to Lisbon, the majority accused of Judaism. In order to know who those Christians were, who were those New Christians, the main historical sources are the handwritten documents of the Tribunal do Santo Ofício, of Holy Office of the Inquisition, as well as the trials of habilitação in genere. Both sources are also fundamental to the studies of the blood purity, and one of the main instruments to know the origins of the family, mainly by the genealogies that are one of the fundamental pieces of the trial files. In the century and the 17th century, 310 prisoners were arrested by the Inquisition. From these, 108 were accused of Judaism. Only those accused of Judaism were sent to be judged in Lisbon. The others stayed in the colony. In the 18th century, 663 persons natural from or living in Brazil were arrested. Out of those, 484 were New Christians accused of Judaism heresy, which clearly demonstrate the greater interest of the Inquisition for the New Christians over those accused of other crimes. The main drive for the Inquisition were the denunciations, and their arrests were made following the family line. Mothers that denounced sons, sons that reported grandparents, and then all the relationship net of the first person arrested. And that is the path that the researchers follow. Most of the research in Brazil follow the families. Pernambuco was the first location where the New Christian established themselves, and their mark continued to be relevant until today. It was also the place where it was established the first synagogue of the Americas in the 17th century, during what we call the Dutch period. Many New Christians that had left Recife and Olinda and established themselves in Paraíba, a region that belonged to the Pernambuco's bishopric and where the Holy Office acted with more rigor. The New Christians' crypto-Judaism was more evident in some regions, as in Minas Gerais. In the inquisitorial documents, the region of Ribeirão do Carmo appears as one of the Judaism centers in Minas Gerais. The residence of Francisco Ferreira Isidro, a businessman, who was located near Ribeirão do Carmo, is often quoted as a meeting place for the New Christian merchants where they discussed business and practiced Jewish rituals and ceremonies. He was a prominent businessman and kept relationships with merchants from all over Minas Gerais, Bahia, and Rio de Janeiro. He received the New Christians annually in his house from Yom Kippur, when they together fasted to celebrate what was called the Great Day. From the prisoners in Minas Gerais in the decades of 1730s and the 1740s, most were recent immigrants that arrived from Portugal in the 18th century. Minas Gerais was the region that most gave New Christians to the bonfires of the Inquisition. 6 were given to the Crown Justice to be killed, relaxados ao braço secular. In Rio de Janeiro in the 17th century, crypto-Judaism was more evident that it would be a century later. Since the end of the 16th century, New Christian families established in Rio de Janeiro, and among them there was those who were running from the Inquisition that at the time began to investigate the behavior and the fate of the settlers in the northeast of Brazil, as well as those who just arrived from Portugal, already tried by the Inquisition, heretics according to them. Being sent to Brazil was a part of their sentencing as heretics. A great number of complaints against the fate of this new community were sent to the Inquisition. A dentist, a New Christian, in his house in the early 1620s, he gathered a group of New Christians every Friday, and in it they made their esnoga until the pretenses of playing cards. The prior of the Convento do Carmo in Rio de Janeiro sent a report to the Inquisitor of the kingdom, in which he requested that the Holy Office ended the dissolution of the people of the nation of the Jewish. The friar was not the only one to complain about the New Christians. Other chronicles, as Friar Manuel Calado and the French traveler François Foget, mentioned that three-quarters of the white population in the colony was composed by Jews. In Rio de Janeiro, 325 New Christians were arrested, accused of crypto-Judaism. When the arrest order was issued, all assets of the accused were sequestered. This represented a prejudgment of these conversos, of these New Christians, since they were considered guilty before the judgment. Only the New Christians had their assets sequestered when they were arrested. The prisoners that were imprisoned for other crimes kept their assets, their properties. At the end of the 16th century and the beginning of the 17th century, we can find at least 3 esnogas denounced to the tribunal. One in Matoin in Bahia that belonged to the Antunes family, one in Pernambuco, and one in Rio de Janeiro. At least 2 more synagogues can be found in Minas Gerais in the 18th century. One was the house of the Ferreira Isidro, and we find New Christians meeting in specific hostels owned by people such as Domingo Ramirez, that after being arrested in Rio de Janeiro, was granted a permit to return to the colony and established himself in a farm near the Vila Rica de Ouro Preto. In these hostels, many New Christians were passing guests that reunited themselves in a snog. Every New Christian that was arrested confessed that during a certain period of time had believed in the Moses law to save their soul, and in observance of such law had practiced specific ceremonies and had communications with co-religionists of the said law. The New Christians knew that they were New Christians. They knew how they were New Christians through their mother, grandmother, or their father. In colonial society, everyone knew who was and who was not New Christian. From Jewish origin, they were baptized soon after they were born and grew up as Catholics. They went to the church, sat through Mass, communed, and confessed. Most of them were chrismated, knew all the Catholic prayers, made the cross signal, kneeled, and called for the saints. To the outside world, all New Christians had exemplary behavior and looked exactly like the old Christians. However, they lived in a racist society that considered them impure and with infected blood. A society that repeatedly issues laws to maintain their exclusion, and therefore they had to develop survival tactics that varied in different regions of the country. While, for example, in Bahia, they tried to marry outside the New Christian nucleus, in Rio de Janeiro they did the opposite and tried to maintain an endogamic behavior by marrying within the New Christian community. Right after the forced conversion, those who had been Jews and also their sons and even then their grandsons continued to be secretly Jewish, the crypto Jews. With time, practicing Judaism became more complicated. The rules and behaviors from the law of Moses were gradually fading from the memory as the New Christian community was getting more and more isolated from the official Jewish world outside the Iberian Peninsula. The difficulties in communication, the prohibition of schools of teaching the Bible and Hebrew, and mainly the mortal danger of being found out by the Inquisition, severely limited the Jewish practice to a few practices and principles committed to the memory. It was not a deep or orthodox Judaism. It was an oral transmission from those who knew the Jewish practice better. In the 18th century, the New Christians had been Christians for over 2 centuries, therefore not exactly new. New Christians were not persecuted because they were heretics to the Catholic faith, but mainly because they had a Jewish background. We could say that the Inquisition was not primarily concerned if they were or not practicing Judaism in secrecy. The way the trials evolved proved heresy, whether it existed or not. The defendant had to plead guilty to save its life. The better one knew the inner functioning of the tribunal, the faster one was able to be out of prison. The distinction between new and old Christians lasted until 1773, when the Marquês de Pombal ended the distinction by way of legislation. The Jewish memory was then fading until it disappeared from the New Christian and its descendants' conscience. However, traces of the New Christian culture remained alive on the mentality and even some practices, especially in the Northeast. That is explained by the fact that the Northeast was the first place where the first new Christians established themselves, bringing with them a stronger and more recent memory of Judaism. Câmara Cascudo, one of Brazil's most important folklorists, tells that one reminiscence of a Jewish blessing was a popular saying that lives until today, passar a mão pela cabeça, to touch the head. Some of those memories also remember the new Christian's martyrdom. He used to hear his mother say, "Tem fogo para assar judeu, there is enough fire to roast a Jew," a clear association with the bonfires used by the Inquisition to burn the new Christians. The Holy Office Tribunal, under the cover of heresy, looked for the Jew. The Jew, even after he went through the autos de fé and even being received in the arms of the church again, remained always a suspect of heresy. The discrimination was there evident as they were forced to use the San Benito, the yellow star of the Iberian Peninsula. To sum it up, we can say that in the New Christian question studies, some progress is being made. What should be done is to compare the diverse regions and centuries to see the evolution of crypto-Judaism and the degree of assimilations of the new Christians in the society. The greatest challenge is to connect or to reconnect the Bnei Anusim to their original Jewish families. The use of different means that we saw today, such as DNA, can help. The genealogies that we find in the trial files are also a very helpful tool. However, they do not show a Jewish identity or the existence of a crypto-Judaic memory. The Jewish identity and the Jewish memory are paramount to the definition of a Jew. I would like to thank you all for your attention and hope this presentation was helpful.